The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and secrets, a place where time seemed to fold in on itself. Eleanor, barely 22, stood trembling in her wedding dress, the lace catching the sunlight that spilled through the window. Her grandmother, Agnes, moved with the quiet grace of someone who had carried a lifetime of stories, her hands stirring a pot of soup as if it held the answers to the world. Eleanor's heart raced. Today was her wedding day, but it wasn't the vows or the guests that made her palms sweat. It was the weight of the moment in this small, weathered kitchen. Agnes had called her here, away from the flurry of preparations, with a promise. There's something you need before you walk down that aisle. Agnes turned, her eyes sharp despite the wrinkles framing them. She wore an apron faded from decades of use, its pockets heavy with the ghosts of meals past. "Sit, child," she said, her voice a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the wooden table. Eleanor obeyed, her dress rustling as she perched on the edge of a chair. The room was alive with the clink of spoons and the soft bubble of broth, but there was something else, an undercurrent of something unspoken. From her apron pocket, Agnes pulled a small, tarnished locket, its silver surface etched with delicate vines. "This was your mother's," she said, placing it in Eleanor's hands. The metal was cool, heavier than it looked, as if it carried more than just its own weight. Eleanor's breath caught. Her mother had died when she was too young to remember her face, leaving only fragments of stories and a void that ached in quiet moments. "Open it," Agnes urged, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she pried the locket open. Inside was a tiny photograph, yellowed at the edge, a baby, no more than a few months old, with wide eyes and a tuft of dark hair. Eleanor's eyes stung with recognition. "That's me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Agnes nodded, her lips curving into a smile that held both pride and pain. "Your mother took that photo the day she knew she'd never see you grow up. She wanted you to have something of her, something to carry into your new life." Eleanor clutched the locket, her heart a tangle of joy and grief. She had spent years imagining her mother, piecing together a woman from her father's sparse words and old letters. Now here was a moment captured, a love preserved. The kitchen, with its worn linoleum and chipped teacups, felt suddenly sacred, a place where the past reached out to touch the present. "Why now?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why give this to me today?" Agnes leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. "Because today, you're starting a new chapter, and no one should walk into a marriage without knowing where they come from." Her eyes flickered with something Eleanor couldn't name: regret, perhaps, or a secret held too long. "There's more to this locket than you think. But for now, wear it. Let it remind you that you're never alone." Eleanor fastened the locket around her neck, its weight settling against her collarbone. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, a reminder of the wedding waiting beyond the door. She wanted to ask more, to unravel the mystery in Agnes's words, but the moment was interrupted by a knock. Her cousin, Lila, poked her head in, her bridesmaid dress a soft lavender. "Ellie, they're ready for you." The music's starting. Eleanor stood, her legs unsteady, the locket a quiet anchor against her skin. She looked at Agnes, expecting a final word, but her grandmother only smiled, her eyes glistening. "Go," Agnes said. "You're ready." The ceremony was a blur of flowers and vows, but Eleanor's mind kept drifting to the locket. As she stood beside her groom, Daniel, she felt its presence like a heartbeat. The guests clapped, the band played, and the world spun on, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that the locket held more than a photograph. There was a story behind it, one Agnes hadn't fully told. That night, as the reception wound down, Eleanor slipped away to find Agnes. The old woman was sitting alone on the porch, a shawl draped over her shoulders, staring at the stars. "Grandma," Eleanor said, sitting beside her, "what didn't you tell me about the locket?" Agnes's face tightened, her fingers tracing the edge of her shawl. "It's not just a keepsake," she said finally. "Your mother, she left something else inside it. A letter. But it's not for today. You'll know when it's time." Eleanor's pulse quickened. A letter? From her mother? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She wanted to press Agnes, to demand answers, but the old woman's expression stopped her. There was a weight there, a story too heavy for a wedding night. "Promise me you'll wait," Agnes said, her voice firm. "Some truths need time to breathe." Eleanor nodded, though her mind raced. The locket, now warm against her skin, felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. As she returned to the reception, Daniel's laughter pulling her back to the present, she couldn't shake the feeling that her mother's story was only beginning to unfold. The days after the wedding were a whirlwind of suitcases and new beginnings. Eleanor and Daniel settled into a small apartment, its walls bare but brimming with possibility. Yet, even as she unpacked boxes and hung curtains, Eleanor's thoughts returned to the locket. It hung around her neck constantly, a quiet reminder of the letter Agnes had mentioned. She hadn't opened it again, not yet. Something about Agnes's warning some truths need time to breathe kept her fingers still. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Eleanor sat at their tiny kitchen table, the locket in her hands. Daniel was at work, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She traced the etched vines, wondering about the letter inside. What could her mother have written? A farewell? A confession? The not knowing gnawed at her, but so did her promise to Agnes. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find a man she didn't recognize, his coat soaked from the rain. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that seemed to carry a story of their own. "Eleanor?" he asked, his voice rough but kind. "Yes," she said, her grip tightening on the door. "Who are you?" He hesitated, glancing at the locket around her neck. "My name's Thomas. I knew your mother. Agnes told me you might need to talk." Eleanor's heart skipped. A stranger who knew her mother? She invited him in, her curiosity outweighing her caution. Thomas sat awkwardly at the table, his hands clasped as if steadying himself. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," he said. "But when Agnes told me you had the locket, I thought maybe it's time." "Time for what?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp. The locket felt heavier now, as if it sensed the conversation. Thomas took a deep breath. "Your mother, Clara, and I were friends. Close friends. Before she married your father." His eyes softened, but there was pain there too. She was extraordinary, full of life, always dreaming. But she carried a lot of secrets, ones she didn't share with many. Eleanor leaned forward, her pulse racing. "What secrets? Did they have to do with the locket?" Thomas nodded slowly. "The locket was her way of keeping you close, even when she knew she was running out of time. But it's more than that. The letter inside, it's not just for you. It's for someone else, too." "Someone else?" Eleanor's mind spun. "Who?" Thomas looked away, his jaw tight. "I can't say. Not yet. Agnes made me promise to let you find your own way to it. But I can tell you this. Your mother wasn't just leaving you a memory. She was leaving you a choice." Eleanor's hands trembled. A choice? The word felt like a door creaking open, revealing a room she wasn't ready to enter. She wanted to press Thomas for more, but his expression mirrored Agnes' guarded, protective. "Why are you here then?" she asked. "If you can't tell me everything?" "Because," Thomas said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I owed Clara that much. To make sure you weren't alone when the time came." The rain outside grew louder, a steady drumbeat that matched Eleanor's racing heart. Thomas left soon after, promising to return if she needed him. Alone again, Eleanor stared at the locket, its secrets now heavier than ever. She thought of her mother, a woman she knew only through absence, and wondered what choice could be so important that it needed to be hidden in a locket. The next morning, Eleanor drove to Agnes's house, determined to get answers. The kitchen was the same, warm, cluttered, alive with the scent of baking bread. Agnes was at the stove, stirring a pot as if nothing had changed. But when she saw Eleanor, her eyes narrowed. "You've seen Thomas," she said, not a question. "How did you know?" Eleanor asked, her voice sharp with frustration. "Why didn't you tell me about him? About the letter? About any of this?" Agnes sighed, setting her spoon down. "Because some things you have to discover on your own. Your mother wanted it that way. She didn't want you burdened before you were ready." "Ready for what?" Eleanor's voice rose, her hands clenched. "I'm married now. I'm starting a life. If there's something I need to know, tell me." Agnes's face softened, but her voice was firm. "The letter will tell you what you need. But not yet. Live your life, Eleanor. Love your husband. The rest will come when it's time." Eleanor wanted to argue, to demand the truth, but Agnes's eyes held a quiet strength that silenced her. She left the kitchen feeling more lost than ever, the locket a burning weight against her chest. As she drove home, the rain returned, blurring the world outside. She didn't know what her mother's choice was, but she felt its shadow looming, waiting for her to step into it. Months passed, and the locket became a quiet companion in Eleanor's new life. She and Daniel built routines: morning coffee, evening walks, dreams of a future family. Yet, the locket's mystery lingered, a question mark in the back of her mind. She hadn't seen Thomas again, and Agnes remained tight-lipped, her kitchen a fortress of half-truths. Eleanor tried to focus on the present, but the locket's weight seemed to grow with each passing day. One crisp autumn afternoon, Eleanor found herself at a flea market, drawn to a stall of old photographs and trinkets. She wasn't sure why she stopped. Maybe it was the pull of nostalgia, or maybe the locket was guiding her. Among the cluttered table, her eyes landed on a small, leather-bound journal, its cover worn but intact. The vendor, an elderly woman with a kind smile, noticed her interest. "That belonged to a young woman years ago," she said. "Found it in an estate sale. No name, but it's full of heart." Eleanor bought the journal on impulse, tucking it into her bag. That night, alone in the apartment, she opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting, elegant, slanted, achingly familiar. Her breath caught as she read the first line. "To my daughter, who I'll never see grow up." It was her mother's. The journal was a collection of letters, some finished, some half-written, all addressed to Eleanor. Clara wrote of her hopes, her fears, her love for a daughter she knew she'd never raise. But one entry, dated just weeks before her death, stopped Eleanor cold. "There's a truth I can't share, not yet. It's in the locket, with your photo. If you're reading this, you're close. But be careful, my love. Some choices break more than they heal." Eleanor's hands shook as she read. The locket, still around her neck, felt like it was burning. She opened it, her fingers fumbling, and saw something she hadn't noticed before: a tiny fold of paper tucked behind the photograph. Her heart pounded as she unfolded it. The letter was short, written in her mother's hand. "Find the house on Willow Lane. Ask for Margaret. She'll know." Margaret? Eleanor's mind raced. She'd never heard the name, but the address, Willow Lane, was in a neighboring town, not far. The next morning, she drove there, the journal and locket her only guides. Willow Lane was a quiet street, lined with old houses and overgrown gardens. Number 17 stood out, its paint peeling but its windows warm with light. Eleanor knocked, her heart in her throat. The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes wide with recognition. "You're Clara's daughter," she said, not a question. "You have her locket." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. Margaret invited her in, her movements hesitant, as if she, too, carried a secret. The living room was cluttered with books and photographs, one of which caught Eleanor's eye: a young Clara, laughing, her arm around a teenage Margaret. "You were her sister?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling. Margaret's face crumpled. "Her half-sister. We didn't grow up together. Our father, he had another family. Clara found me when she was sick, when she knew she didn't have long. She wanted you to have a family, even if she couldn't be there." Eleanor's knees buckled. A half-sister? Her mother had another family, a secret kept from everyone? She sank into a chair, the locket clutched in her hand. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" she whispered. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Clara wanted to protect you. Our father, he wasn't a good man. She thought knowing about me, about him, would hurt you more than it helped. But she left the locket and the journal, hoping you'd find me when you were ready." Eleanor's mind reeled. Her mother's choice, the one Thomas and Agnes had hinted at, was this: to reveal a family hidden in the shadows, or to let Eleanor live without the burden of a painful past. The letter in the locket wasn't just a message. It was a map to a truth Clara had guarded with her life. As Eleanor drove home, the journal on the seat beside her, she felt both heavier and lighter. She had a sister, a piece of her mother she'd never known. But with that knowledge came questions about her father, about the secrets Agnes and Thomas still held, about what it meant to carry this truth into her new life. Eleanor couldn't sleep that night. The journal lay open on her bedside table, its pages whispering her mother's voice. Margaret's revelation had cracked something open inside her, a longing for connection, but also a fear of what else she might uncover. The locket, once a comfort, now felt like a key to a door she wasn't sure she wanted to open. Daniel sensed her restlessness, his hand finding hers in the dark. "You don't have to do this alone," he said, his voice steady. But Eleanor wasn't sure she could share this, yet not until she understood it herself. The next day, she returned to Agnes's kitchen, the journal and locket in hand. Agnes was kneading dough, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she'd been expecting this visit. "You found her," Agnes said, her eyes meeting Eleanor's. There was no surprise in her voice, only a quiet resignation. "Why didn't you tell me about Margaret?" Eleanor demanded, her voice raw. "You knew. Thomas knew. Why keep it from me?" Agnes wiped her hands on her apron, her face etched with lines of regret. "Because your mother asked me to. She wanted you to have a clean start, untainted by her past. Your grandfather, her father, was a cruel man. He left Clara's mother for another family, Margaret's family. Clara didn't want you to carry that pain." Eleanor's throat tightened. "But Margaret's my sister. I had a right to know." Agnes nodded, her eyes glistening. "You did. And I'm sorry. But Clara believed you'd find your way to the truth when you were strong enough." The locket was her way of making sure. Eleanor opened the locket, the tiny photograph of her baby self staring back. "What else is there?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What else didn't she tell me?" Agnes hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. "This came with the locket," she said. "Clara left it for you, for when you found Margaret." Eleanor's hands shook as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her mother's handwriting filling the page. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you're reading this, you've met Margaret. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. Our family was broken, but you and Margaret can make it whole. There's one more thing I ask of you. Forgive. Not just me, but our father. He didn't know how to love us, but you can choose differently. Live with love, my girl. Always." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. Forgive? The word felt impossible, heavy with the weight of a man she'd never known, a man who'd hurt her mother and left Margaret in the shadows. Yet, her mother's words carried a quiet strength, a plea to heal what had been broken. That evening, Eleanor invited Margaret to the apartment. They sat across from each other, strangers bound by blood, the journal and locket on the table between them. Margaret spoke first, her voice soft. "I didn't know about you until Clara found me. She was so sick, but all she talked about was you. She wanted us to have each other." Eleanor reached for Margaret's hand, her fingers trembling. "I want that too," she said, "but I don't know how." Margaret smiled, her eyes mirroring Clara's in the old photograph. "We'll figure it out. Together." In the weeks that followed, Eleanor and Margaret began to build a relationship, tentative but growing. They shared stories, laughed over Clara's quirks, and cried over the years they'd lost. Agnes joined them sometimes, her kitchen once again a place of connection, its walls holding the echoes of their mother's love. The locket remained around Eleanor's neck, a reminder of the choice her mother had left her to forgive, to heal, to love. It wasn't easy. The shadow of her grandfather's cruelty lingered, as did the pain of her mother's absence. But with each visit to Margaret, each moment in Agnes's kitchen, Eleanor felt the pieces of her family coming together, not perfect, but whole. As winter settled in, Eleanor stood in her own kitchen, stirring a pot of soup the way Agnes had taught her. Daniel was beside her, chopping vegetables, his presence a quiet anchor. The locket gleamed in the light, its secrets now part of her story. She didn't have all the answers, but she had something Bettera family, imperfect but hers.